Just a year before the events of Cyberpunk 2077, an epic tale of crime and cyborgs takes place. We have a young man named David Martinez. I guess you could say he's going through a rebellious phase, but let's just blame that one on society. Alright, so our boy David attends an elite academy despite being dirt poor. His mother is an emergency medical technician, but rumor has it that she's involved with some pretty sketchy stuff. David's aware that they don't have the financial means to continue his education, and it's not like he sees much merit in it anyway, which is why instead of legally upgrading his cyberware to continue attending the school, he does it illegally to save money and crashes the school system. As you can expect, this was a disaster. His mother's called to the school, she has to apologize, and will also have to pay for all the damage caused by her son, as if things weren't already hard enough for them. Following this brief yet unpleasant visit to the principal's office, they get in their grizzled car and are on their way back home. She's obviously quite upset, and she lets him know, but David just insists that he drop out. They don't have the money anyway, plus even if he does continue, it's not like the society will give a future to an unruly kid like him. Hearing this, his mother takes an emotional blow. She knows exactly how it feels, but because of the state of the world, it's essential for him to get a good education, which is why she spends all day, every day, just wasting away to continue paying his tuition and other expenses. Unfortunately, their conversations cut short because of a drive-by shooting. A prominent gang shoots at another car, which then ends up crashing into their car. Yep, suddenly it's all black. When David regains his senses, he realizes that he's stuck under the destroyed car parts. There's a fire going on, and he can see his mother's motionless body laying on the street. A medical service called the trauma team arrives, but since they aren't subscribers to the service, the medical assistance is denied. David couldn't help but curse in frustration. With the way they acted, the trauma team basically just said that his mother's free trial of living has expired. He somehow manages to get out of the crumpled car parts and then takes his mother's unconscious body to a not-so-pleasant hospital. Here, she starts receiving surgery. David leaves with her stuff to go and figure out the expenses. Not only did they have to pay for the hospital, but their apartment was also locked since the rent was overdue. He breaks through the window and then finds the missing cyberware from a recent incident. He calls a certain doc who sells goodies on the black market and loves hooking up with simulations of girls. He wants to sell the cyberware to the doc, but hangs up since he was only gonna get $10K for it. The next morning, while his mother is still in the hospital, he's on his way to school, but a student named Katsuo bullies the living daylights out of him together with his goons. And just when David is lying helpless in a random alley, he receives a call from the hospital telling him that his mother is now dead. Poor boy goes and picks up his mother's cremated remains. He can't even have a proper funeral. What's he supposed to do now? He's walking the night city streets completely lifeless, and he still has to pay the school for that money they owe. With no one else to turn to, he calls the doc once again to sell that cyberware, but instead of the $10K, he says he'll only pay $6K. If that wasn't enough, he then receives a call from that bully named Katsuo, who insults him, and then also his mother's death. You can only imagine what David must have been feeling at that moment. Something inside of him triggers. He dashes straight to the doc's place and tells him to literally update his software with that cyberware. The doc is startled. He states that it'll end him, but David has resolved to go through with the surgery. Thanks to it, David suddenly gains extraordinary strength, speed, and agility. He was now a superhuman, but the physical repercussions were going to be insane. Now, remember that bully named Katsuo? David shows up at his school once again, and this time, he completely destroys him. So much so that the poor clown says he'll call his daddy. Apparently, his daddy is someone famous. Anyway, David was done with the revenge. He goes back to the streets, his jacket's covered with blood because of the usage of his new cyberware, but while that is a problem, he still couldn't help but laugh his ass off at what he just did. Everyone looks at him after hearing his laughter, but he's already gone. He went back to the apartment to wash his jacket and relax on the couch. Meanwhile, that bully's father, named Tanaka, is watching the video where his son got destroyed by David. He's informed that David now has the implant of a man named Norris, who was caught up in a cyber psycho incident, but unlike Norris, he doesn't really seem all that affected by it. This catches Tanaka's attention as he told that David would be an interesting specimen to test their new product. As for David, he gets a call from the principal but decides to ghost it and takes a shower. Later, he's roaming the streets once again. He gets on a train but experiences a sensation on his back. Yeah, someone's trying to pickpocket him. It's a beautiful white-haired girl with a mysterious aura. David has caught glimpses of her pickpocketing others before. He easily uses his superior speed to simply slow down time for himself and grabs her hand. This leads to her pulling him aside and having a conversation. She becomes aware of his implant and proposes the idea of working together with her. David's okay with that, and just between you and me, she's totally his type. She introduces herself as Lucy, and likes to call David her trainee. It starts with her testing his abilities, but when they're done, David ends up collapsing because of the overuse of his abilities. She takes him to the medical authorities, but since he doesn't have medical insurance, and his implant was illegal, things get quite hectic. Lucy and David somehow manage to get away and make it to that doc's place. He's surprised to see that David is even alive after using the implant 8 times in a single day. Not only will he have to be careful with the number of times he uses the implant, the medicine he needs is also quite expensive. Lucy pays the docs the chips they stole, but it only gets them 2 days worth of meds. However, Doc tells David to get the implant removed. At this rate, he'll only last a few more days. Besides, the psychological dangers inflicted by the implant are going to be terrific as well. Though David just walks out. He has a chat with Lucy while sitting on a bench, and then she invites him to her apartment. I like where this is going, guys. They have a drink, and she takes his jacket off, only to then put it on herself so that she can reprogram it in order to display the letters Edgerunners on the back. David asks what it's about, and she explains that Edgerunners is pretty much just a different word from Cyberpunk. Following this conversation, David points out a poster on the wall, which seems to be about lunar life. He actively mocks the idea of life on the moon, but Lucy seems to have the exact opposite stance. One day, she'd like to leave Night City in order to fly to the moon. She then takes him to a virtual simulation of what it's like to be on the moon, but it only lasts a few minutes. He's brought back to reality by a man named Maine and his gang. Maine states that the implant he has on himself is supposed to be his, and punches David in the face. Lucy, on the other hand, is so chill, it's almost like she knew it would play out this way. Anyway, Maine also seems to be furious at his partner, who was supposed to bring this cyberware to him. David realizes that he's probably talking about his mother, and explains that he is Gloria's son. Unfortunately, she died 2 days ago. This somehow hits Maine in the feels. He also realizes that David is coping really well with the implant and decides to add him to their ranks. David goes along with it, but as he may expect, he's disappointed about Lucy's honey trap. The man goes back to his apartment. He's depressed and angry. Come next morning and his mood is still the same, but surprisingly, he gets a message from the principal, who not only praises his performance for how he had destroyed Katsuo, but he also offers him a scholarship to make him return to the academy. All they ask is an apology. But David's moved on. He meets Maine and his gang in a warehouse where he meets other quirky individuals. I'll talk about the important ones. We have Pillar. He's a big yet funny guy who gets underhanded jobs done. He has a cute sister named Rebecca, who also tags along and gets jobs done. Her tongue is really sharp though. There's Dorio. She's Maine's right hand. She's also quite strong. I mean, just look at her. She's shredded. Then there's Kiri. She's an enigmatic lady with a scary detachable jaw. There's more, but let's save them for later. For now, David has to join these on a heist. Their plan is to simply get some navigation data from an Arasaka bodyguard named Maxim. Looks like the guy in question was enjoying a boxing match, but they cleverly manipulate the match, and since the player he bets on loses, he starts crying and drinking. David was then going to get the data from him, but the bodyguard receives a call from his boss and prepares to leave. However, David and Lucy quickly get into his limbo as the others divert Maxim. It doesn't go as planned, and the bodyguard ends up placing a bounty on the car. Perfect. Now the situation was even crazier, but just when they're about to be destroyed by members of a notorious gang, Maine comes in for the rescue and kills those gangsters. Things went south along the way, but they got what they needed, and so everyone celebrated in front of a bar. David was now fully accepted as a member, but Maine advised him to get more chrome to make things easier for himself. The celebration's quite fun. Pillar has everyone's attention thanks to his juggling skills, but a man with multiple eyes named Faraday appears and ruins the fun. He tells Maine that their heist was a failure and the data's useless, and then also mentions their next target, who just so happens to be Katsuo's father, Tanaka. They have to observe his actions. When Faraday leaves, Maine tells everyone that Faraday has money, which is why he's important to them. And then the party resumes. David sees Pillar trying to get closer to Lucy, while he himself is hit on by Rebecca as she welcomes him to the crew. Following this, David decides to give the principal a call and tells him basically to piss off. He then looks around to find Lucy, but looks like she and Pillar are both gone. Later, David becomes somewhat of an errand boy for Pillar and Rebecca. Maine teaches him how to drive, and he jogs with Lucy at night. Life's pretty hectic, but hey, at least it's fun. He is also helpful to the gang during missions. For example, he took out a gang of scavengers, rescued Rebecca from another gang, and then also helped Lucy with her pickpocketing heists as usual. She tells him that she's a talented netrunner, meaning unlike David, whose body was enhanced, in her case, it was her brain. Though David still doesn't know much about her as a person or her past. When he's with Maine, he mentions how he has a thing for Lucy, but is also sure that it isn't mutual. He wonders if it's okay to even trust her. Such casual conversations become quite common now that David started to feel at home with the new gang members. However, on their way back from a bar, Pillar starts picking on a homeless man who's just trying to pee in the open. It wasn't a good idea at all since he has cyberpsychosis. The homeless man instantly shoots Pillar in the head and kills him. He then tries to attack Lucy, but David uses his powers to kill him. He then takes Lucy home while the others stick around at the place of Pillar's death. Then, under the moonlit sky, Lucy states that her dream to go to the moon is indeed genuine. Hearing this, David makes an unwavering vow that he'll take her to the moon. The atmosphere is just right, and so Lucy kisses him. Following this, the gang goes back to getting information on Tanaka. Kiwi discovers that he often indulges in quite illicit and inappropriate brain dances recorded by Jimmy Kurosaki. We'll call him JK. As for what brain dance means here, well, it's basically a way to relive someone else's memories. You can experience anything that another person has, as long as it was recorded. Realizing this, the gang makes a plan to bait Tanaka by capturing JK, but it backfires and JK ends up capturing David instead. JK flees as Lucy and Dorio try to pursue him, but as he's on the run, he starts showing David some extremely depraved and traumatic brain dances to basically break him and cause cyberpsychosis. But Lucy and Dorio catch up and stop him. Now that JK was cornered, he agrees to help them lure Tanaka, but also tells David that he'll eventually go cyberpsycho because of his implant. Anyway, Tanaka arrives at the location to meet JK, but since it was a trap, he's captured. However, JK also doesn't get out of it scot-free. He's mortally wounded in the process. As for Tanaka, he's an important person, and since he seems to be in a dire state, the trauma team is on their way. Realizing this, the gang quickly evacuates with Tanaka, but David couldn't help but think about what JK said to him. Later, when they've relocated, Kiwi starts hacking into Tanaka's cyberware. Unfortunately, Maine was a little not right in the head, or in simpler terms, he was developing signs of cyberpsychosis, which resulted in a lot of mood swings, lack of control over his implant, and random hallucinations. He ends up attacking and renders her incapable of performing the task. Lucy has to take her place, but of course, they'll have to be wary of Maine. So this time, David keeps Tanaka in check while Lucy enters his brain. Tanaka gains consciousness again while Lucy is still inside his mind. He realizes the situation he's in and starts gaslighting David by telling him that he was the one who made the academy reverse his expulsion. He still has a future if he comes back to the academy, but if he stays with the gang, they'll eventually kill him after making use of him and the information he has. It wasn't much, but it definitely caused David to hesitate for a moment, which caused Tanaka's neural implants to short circuit, and since Lucy was inside his mind, she was going to get killed as well. Fortunately, Dorio comes up and saves her by disconnecting, although this meant that their location is now on the radar of the trauma team. The gang quickly sets an escape plan into motion. David and Lucy are told to escape first, while Maine and Dorio are planning on using Tanaka to disrupt the upcoming forces so that those two can get away with the data. But when the battle takes place, Maine ends up falling victim to cyberpsychosis, and so Dorio dies as she comforts them while covering for him. David was going to at least save Maine, but he could only watch from a distance as his leader blew himself up. That's the terror of cyberpsychosis. David takes Maine's arms and escapes. The flow of time continues, and it's already been a few months since the Tanaka incident. David's now the new leader of the gang. Not to mention, he's also implanted Maine's arms on himself. This increased his skill set and also earned him an elite status as an Edgerunner. Be that as it may, Lucy's no longer with the crew, and he can't manage to convince her to come back either. The rest of the team keeps on finishing more jobs until Faraday offers them a big one. Once again, they'll have to go up against Arasaka. Following this order, David goes and talks with Lucy again. He asks her more about her past, and so she states that she used to be part of a special test team. They were all children raised with the intention of turning them all into netrunners, who can delve deep into the old net and recover lost data. But since they would often run into crude AI and malware, most of them would lose their lives every time. It was a suicide mission. Fortunately, Lucy managed to escape and made it to Night City. Back then, the only person she cared about was herself, but now, she cared about David too, especially since all those implants are taking a major toll on her. Then, there's also the matter of cyberpsychosis. Who knows when it'll hit him. Later, David moves forward with a new mission and kills an Arasaka lab director. Unfortunately, he was already showing signs of cyberpsychosis. On the other hand, Lucy had killed an Arasaka agent as well. This becomes a cause for concern, and their counterintelligence begins the investigation behind the causes of these deaths. They deduce that it's definitely Miltech, which is the organization Faraday is a part of, and so they try to assassinate him, but he just barely manages to survive. Not to mention, Miltech was also not providing Faraday proper security since his contributions have been so and so. Seeing this, Faraday simply gives in to the Arasaka organization with the intention of attaining some middle ground. They tell him that they're willing to overlook how he is the reason behind Tanaka's death, but he'll have to track down and report the netrunner who's actually responsible for stealing Tanaka's data. Subsequently, David's condition keeps worsening. He ends up killing an innocent secretary who also reminded him of his mother, and then suffers a strong psychological blow. That doc tells him how there's still time. He should cut down on the usage of his implants, but he gets aggressive with the doc, and that's about the end of their frugal relationship. David then confronts Lucy and asks her to join them once again, but she simply states that there's something she has to take care of first. Our boy David was getting too frustrated. He replies that he'll end their relationship, and for some reason, this seemed to be a genuine problem for Lucy. Anyways, she notices the presence of another Asaka agent, but when she gets there to take them out, she realizes that it was all a trap. Faraday and Kiwi tricked her into a trap. They then interrogate her and finally understand exactly what's going on. Lucy was the one who killed Tanaka. She needed him to be silent and not say another word to David. As for the data she gained from Tanaka, well, she's been hiding that from everyone all this time. Which is reasonable because Tanaka was actually going to have David be a test subject for the exoskeleton, and who knows how that would have ended for David. After understanding what's going on, Faraday tells David and his fellows to seize the Arasaka's main cargo. It's where the exoskeleton happens to be. Conveniently, Miltech also pulls over because of Faraday's suggestion. What Faraday's really planning is for David to take on the exoskeleton and then destroy the Miltech forces in order to demonstrate the power of the exoskeleton. Of course, David will be forced into doing this. Fortunately, Lucy gets a brief opportunity to escape and warn David, but she's immediately captured again. David was genuinely angered, but even so, he annihilates the Miltech forces. And then, he tells Rebecca and the wheelman named Falco about rescuing Lucy and bestowing vengeance upon Faraday. The odds were stacked against them, but David perseveres through the massive toll the implants and the exoskeleton were taking on his body. It was continuously deteriorating. The effects of the immunosuppressants had also diminished. Even so, he confronts Miltech and Arasaka forces, along with Rebecca and Falco. They're headed for the Arasaka Tower. Kiwi, on the other hand, realizes that it wasn't the right idea to work for Faraday, but just when she was going to bail, he decides to kill her. Luckily, she manages to inform David about Faraday's and Lucy's location. Just like that, David aggressively attacks the tower, kills whoever is in his way, and rescues Lucy. As for Faraday, he's rendered useless. The momentum was in David's favor. It may just be his last few fumes of life, but he was still larger than life. However, Arasaka then finally brings out its biggest gun, the legendary cyborg named Atom Smasher. The fight is about as brutally epic as you can expect. Faraday's caught up in the flow of the fight and just instantly dies. Unfortunately, Rebecca is ruthlessly stomped to death by him as well. David then leaves Lucy to Falco and prepares to keep Atom Smasher in check. Even with the exoskeleton and everything, he still couldn't measure up to the sheer terror of this cyborg. Ultimately, our protagonist is completely destroyed by Atom Smasher, but he knows that Lucy got away safely, and so he dies with a feeling of contentment. He knew his time was limited. All he was trying to do in his final moments was make sure Lucy made it out alive. And he did. Therefore, he has no regrets. Time continues to pass, and eventually, Lucy makes her dream of traveling to the moon a reality. It's a feeling of sentiment. While her dream has finally become a reality, the person she loves is no longer with her. A bittersweet ending indeed. So, there you go, guys. That was Cyberpunk Edgerunners. If you like the story, I promise you'll become obsessed with the actual anime. It's just that good. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.